Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy, sir. How are you? Love? How you, love? How you doing, love?
Hi. I've been attacked by the sneezies just as soon as you hit the go button. So
one for a wish.
Me if my head explodes.
1 for a wish, 2 for a kiss, 3 for a letter, 4 for something better. That's what my mum used to say when we sneezed.
What's 12?
12 for a little elf. I don't know. Gesundheit.
It's not going very well.
Gesundheit, my friend. Incredibly looking forward to tonight's show. Our guest coming on, director and filmmaker Whatanui Flavell. Hope you've all done your homework. I saw some people in the chat today, Chewy, saying, I've done my homework, I watched the doco. If you haven't watched the doco, you will not be allowed back. I'll give you the weekend. You can't come back on Monday, so I'll give you the weekend. I'll be kind. If you haven't watched it, it is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable documentary. As someone who was sort of floating around like in radio, but more like music radio at the time, I hadn't really picked up the political bag yet that I love so much now. And I kind of did it maybe just a couple of years later. So know of the story of Foreshore and Seabed, but don't feel like I engaged with the story at the time. So even though it's all very memorable, like I remember, I didn't understand. And the it's an incredible doco.
I think I would echo that. Like, I was definitely aware of the debate going on and seeing people's position and definitely sensing the anger around it, but not really understanding it.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling, like I've seen clips and I've seen the buzz about it. I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing at this stage. But I get the feeling that I'm going to watch it with the eyes and the knowledge that I have now and go, oh my God, how did I miss this? How does anyone Māori
ever think about voting for Labour ever after you watch this documentary? Like, that's how it feels. Like I'm going to play you some audio from it. We can't do the video as well because TVNZ Plus has that special locking mechanism where you can't live stream their stuff. But I'll play you some audio. And honestly, if I didn't tell you if it was Helen Clark and you didn't know her background just by the voice, you'd go, that's a nice ACT party member. With some of the things she says, honestly. Yeah. But listen, let's keep our powder somewhat drier than that. And let's first of all just say a huge thanks to our patrons for coming on board. You guys know what's been going on. You know that the desk blew up last week, and it's thanks to these lovely people that you're watching right now that we were able to actually upgrade and get a new desk all up and running by yesterday. So thank you so much for being a part of what we do. There are a bunch of new people on there. Let me see if I can now remember who they are. Catherine is a new person on there. Paul Robbins is a new person on there. Shout outs. We've also got J Lord, Taylor's version. Now I know what that's about because my kids are Swifties. Taylor's version is, Taylor Swift lost control and the rights to her music. So she re-recorded all her music herself. And so now there's playlists which are owned by the producer, and then there's Taylor's version. So I'm down with the kids, J Lord. I know what's going on. Who else we got? Frith and Karen and David and Stephen. I think Frith upgraded his or her patronage. Who else have we got? Joe the Pode and Simon. I'm going to go with Halcyon. Halcyon. You going Halcyon with that, Chewy? Halcyon Summer?
Yes, that's what I'd say.
Grant Reese, Kerry R. All new people since we last showed our beautiful billboards of beauty. Thank you guys for what you do to help us do what we do. We really appreciate you being on board. And if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support what we do, you can just head to patreon.com/Big Hairy. You can make up the N word to be whatever you like tonight. That's my gift to you. Big Hairy word beginning with
I would suggest strongly going with the classic news.
Oh, would you?
I don't know.
What does your wife say? Big Hairy what?
Nadges,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
she's British. I'm sorry. Is this a reference to what I just put on Facebook?
Nope, no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So you haven't seen this.
No.
Right. Okay. So let me set the scene.
Is this a long one because we've got an interview to do? Is this
No.
to the end of the show? Okay.
I'll give you the short version without the dramatic reading.
Okay.
So 3 of us are standing in the shop, not much going on, very cold, not a lot of customers. A customer walks in, a Pakeha gentleman of a certain generation. He looks at the 3 of us standing at the back of the shop and he goes, meeny, miny, mo, catch it by the toe.
Oh my goodness.
The reaction from all 3 of us, along with what the hell, and do you think that's appropriate, and wind your fucking neck in.
Did you kick him out? What would you have done if you kicked him out? What would your bosses have said?
One of them was my manager.
Mm.
So he wasn't removed, but he was very strongly told what decade he was currently in.
Good Lord. No, hadn't seen that. Terrifying. Thank you for the conversation. I appreciate that's now in my freaking head. All right. Let's welcome to the show director of, in fact, let's pull this up so we can see it all as well. Director of Hikoi Speaking Our Truth. It is on TVNZ Plus right now. Whatanui Flavell. Whatanui, thank you for joining us so much. So excited to talk to you this evening.
Kia ora, boys. No, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak a little bit about this awesome kaupapa.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what it is. I've already said this to you and kind of hinted it, but honestly, for me, I mean, I know you're not making a romance film, that kind of thing, but it's a tearjerker. Like, honestly, if you can watch this and not be a bit moist in the eyes, there's something wrong. You're probably that guy that walked into Chewy's store, if you can watch this without having a tear in the eye. Hey, look, what I thought we'd do, if it's cool with you, because I haven't got any footage for it to include with our conversation, is we'll just show the trailer. It's a minute and a half. It's on YouTube, and there's some Helen Clark in this, which is not the clip I'm going to use audio-wise, but it'll give some people a bit of a start as to what we are talking about. So this is the trailer for Hikoi Speaking Our Truth.
It was just a real insult. It was just straight theft.
So how big a deal is this, actually?
I don't think it's the first thing people are talking about over the coffee cups.
It was a full-scale sweep. All ownership rights which were available to Māori, gone.
I really don't have anything to say about it.
She was able to play us off.
We had to accept a captain's call.
I felt outraged to have been part of a government that was prepared to do that.
I think it's about raw, venal, selfish politics.
One vote opposed.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention one thing about raw, venous, selfish politics. And if anybody would know, Mr. Peters.
They were furious with me.
It became clear that we needed to do something.
20 years ago, as a 10-year-old boy, myself, my whānau, some of my kura mates, and thousands of others marched in one of the biggest protest movements in history.
You knew yourself. This is something momentous.
What it is the same old faces, the Ken Mears, the Harawira families, the haters and wreckers.
What part of no don't they understand?
You scratched the surface of a racist. Bang.
The weight of people's emotions was palpable.
This is about the anger of Māori.
It's about time we started looking to a new future.
I knew I had to do it.
One thing I wanted to say, Whatanui, is that if you come away from this without feeling just immense love, if you don't feel that towards Tariana Turia, there is something wrong with you. Like the story as you've told it in there, just, I mean, you know, no broadcasting standards here. It's fucking incredible. It's like just coming away from that. I mean, again, working in this job and doing things on talk radio stuff, I've interviewed Tariana a few times, but there's just a different feeling to some of these people who stood their ground then. And it does really feel like, you know, there's the 1975 Land March, there's 81 Springboks tours, there's the Point, Bastion Point, and there's this, and it feels like that they've got that kindred spirit to it. Why did you make this documentary?
I suppose I really wanted to understand how important it was, because like the two of you, I was 11, 12 when this happened. And
right, all right. You don't have to mention how young you are. Like we're all peers. We're all peers here.
And Tamati was a 10-year-old, and we're really close mates, and we were just yarning about it and sort of thinking, man, we realize what came of it, but we have never quite understood how important it was, and also how much of a big moment it was for Māori in terms of how we engage in politics. And so that was probably the genesis of the idea, with the knowing too that we were getting closer to the 20-year anniversary of the Hikoi. We sort of thought, okay, well, let's do that. Bearing in mind, when we got funded to make that documentary, we had a Labour government. Māori weren't, we were unhappy with how the government was treating us, but we were pretty complacent too. We were in a position where we weren't, well, certainly not like we see today. So we sort of thought, oh, well, let's just make it for that 20-year anniversary. And then obviously we had the election. We went from 2 Māori Party MPs to having 6, and all this other stuff that has happened. And funnily enough, when I pitched the idea to TVNZ, they said to me that we don't support historical documentaries. And I was real attacked by that, because I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. This story needs to be told, and people need to understand it. But that was their perspective. They said to me, you need to find a way of making it relevant. And sure enough, as we've seen the last 8 months or so play out, it's become really relevant and topical. So that made my job pretty easy as a storyteller. But that I suppose is the genesis, and I think, for me personally, how much it's affected me and the way that I think now. I never really thought about it when I was growing up, but I realize now how much the Hikoi impacted my life right up until today, and it continues to impact my life, obviously, with the launch of the doco.
If you have like a person that you're thinking about watching this, who is that person? Who have you so we know why you've made it. Who have you made it for?
I've made it for people of my generation, because I don't think that there's any point talking, just reflecting on 20 years ago and let that just be a piece where we just sort of think about what happened 20 years ago and not learn anything from it. I think the objective of it is to target people of my generation who are Māori and Pākehā and other ethnicities who are living here in Aotearoa, who, for us, to encourage us to really start to look at the way that things are done, especially towards Māori, with the hope that we can move past it. Because especially recently, we've found ourselves in a really similar situation, and some of the word that I'm hearing from around the place, especially as we got closer to the launch of the doco, the same sort of sentiments are there.
I'm not entirely sure what order I'm going to ask these questions. I've got a bunch, and sure, you obviously are always going to jump in, but I want to play my first piece of audio. This is cut together from your documentary. It's a couple of different places put together. Oh no, it's not. That's the Don Brash bit. This is a piece from your documentary, because what I'd like to know from you, my question is going to be after this. I know that you asked Helen Clark to be interviewed and she declined, or you didn't hear from her. I'm wanting to know if any of her peers, those people who are fighting and pushing back against it, you've kind of got word of what they think about it. But I'm going to ask you that next. But here's an example of the kinds of things that Helen Clark, remember Māori were Labour loyal for such a long time, said during the period leading up to the Foreshore and Seabed legislation.
Sykes, the haters and wreckers, the people who destroy Waitangi every year, now wanting to do a Waitangi in every town in New Zealand on the way to Wellington, where they'll do a Waitangi on the front steps of Parliament. Is this not what New Zealand has got absolutely sick and tired of?
So to do a Waitangi, like, I don't know if that's in our verbiage, but Helen Clark to do a Waitangi. I mean, it's revolting. I mean, like I said to, I don't know if I said it beforehand or I said it to Chewy, whatever before, if you didn't know who she was and you just scripted those words and said, which political party do these belong to? You go, oh, ACT, or maybe the right side of National. Have you heard word about her reaction to it, or any of those people who are in her circle, as to what they've thought of the doco?
Nah, man. Nah. And I don't really care, to be honest. it's never been about them. Actually, to be honest with you, at the beginning it was. I was trying to get Helen Clark on board this doco because I thought that would validate the documentary. I thought that it would give it some sort of credit if Helen Clark was featured on it. And then I got a wake-up call by my editor, who happens to be Pākehā. She said to me, bro, Whata, come on. Like, the other side of the story has been told so many times. Why do you need to get the other side of the story? Their side's been told so many times. Who cares? Just tell your side of the story and do it from speaking our truth. That's why it's speaking our truth. It's because it's our perspective on what happened. And you put Māori MPs to task with why they made certain decisions, but we're not worrying about the other side of the story.
Yeah. Chewy, got some stuff?
Yeah, look, I think the timing of this is impeccable. And it does seem to be, as Pat said, like there has to be like this generational pushback, move the needle. And the Hikoi then was, I guess, that big push. And it feels like we're preparing for another big push with the treaty debate again. So I think, holding up a mirror for the people that were there and showing it to the young people today that are going to have to do that work, like what got you started, I think is phenomenal timing. I think hearing Helen Clark's words then, Auntie Helen, strong Helen Clark, great Labour leader. Oh, it doesn't sit well with me now.
Chewy, let me tell you one other thing.
Tones off everything.
Let me tell you one other thing, Chewy. There was one of the contributors described how Helen Clark acted, and I've written it down here, was saying that Helen Clark acted like, quote, I'm just going to cut your throats, end quote. That was one of the participants. I can't remember who it was. Sorry, Whatanui, you can probably tell us. Said that's the vibes from Helen Clark. I'm just going to cut your throats. So that was how they were feeling.
That was Mediana Pittman, and to be honest, that was borderline. It was almost cut out of the episode because they were worried that there might be a bit of pushback on that particular line. But yeah, that's how raw it was. Mediana Pittman, the strong activist from Ngāti Kaununu, was the one who recited that line. The interesting thing about that haters and wreckers line is that we went and spoke to every single, whoever you see in that documentary remembers her saying that and being compared to Shrek the Sheep. So that was the whole thing of that time, was that Shrek the Sheep came to the steps of Parliament, and she decided that she would go out and meet Shrek the Sheep, but wouldn't go out and meet the Hikoi when it arrived in Wellington. And when asked why she would go out and see Shrek but not the protesters, is because she responded that Shrek was good company.
Yeah.
So there's lines of that, and it's so vivid in the memory of all the speakers and all the people who participated in the documentary. They remember those words, haters and wreckers, and it shows how much that I suppose stuck in their minds and in their hearts 20 years later.
It's that adage, we get taught as kids of sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's bullshit. It's the wrong way around. Words are still lasting 20 years. Your broken arm is right after 6 weeks. Those words are still there 20 plus years later. Chewy, I kind of interrupted you there, bro. Sorry. You want to keep going?
I've just seen a chat that kind of sort of goes to the point that I was making as well. This is just one thing out of Helen Clark's turn at the wheel. Helen Clark's was a centre-right government. They stiffed the Greens every chance they got to go with New Zealand First and Peter Dunn, and let's not forget the search and surveillance bill and the Uruwera raids.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's funny how if you TVNZ saying that they don't do historical documentaries, right? That seems bananas to me. Because if you don't understand your history, you repeat it. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And I think the benefit here is it has maybe forced your hand to tie it into where we are today. But I think, we need another big push.
the compromise was that it prevented me from getting a primetime slot. So what they said is that, well, if it's historical, because I said, well, we're going to go, we've got to take it somewhere else because I think it's still really relevant and it needs to be told. So if we take it somewhere else, then they, well, no, okay to play. Here, we'll give you an off-peak slot. And upon doing that, it hurt at first. I think that was more my ego saying, hey, hold on, no, this is worth the primetime slot. But when I actually sat back and thought about it, people watching TV on a Sunday morning is not my target audience anyway. It's not the people who I'm wanting to hit. The people who I'm wanting to hit are probably going to be the people who watch it online, on TVNZ Plus, on eventually YouTube. Those are the people who we're really wanting to impact. And so I come to grips with that, and I just sort of thought, okay, well, let's do this for the people who are going to watch it online as opposed to on linear television.
Yeah. Chewy, you were mentioning, and obviously Whatanui, you're saying this about the similarity to what world we're living in today and the words that are getting used. I'm going to play another audio clip. This is from the documentary, but I've just taken the audio off. And close your eyes and think of, don't be scared, baby birds. Think of David Seymour when you hear these words by Don Brash. Because Chewy, not does it feel, just kind of feel the same, it's literally the same script. So this is a couple of clips from put back to back from Don Brash around his audio speech that was featured in the documentary.
None of us was around at the time of the New Zealand Wars. None of us had anything to do with the confiscations. There is a limit to how much any generation can apologize for the sins of its great grandparents.
That's the speech.
Dr. Brash is with me. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you say to people who accuse you now of Māori bashing?
Well, I say to them, how can you possibly accuse me of Māori bashing when what I'm saying is I want all New Zealanders, Māori, non-Māori, to be treated equally. That can hardly be Māori bashing.
Well, Dr. Brash, New Zealand is perceived as having such a harmonious society. Surely it's a bit of a stretch to say that this country is racially divided.
I think we're moving down a racially divided track. We've got more and more laws in New Zealand which give special preferences or special status to Māori New Zealanders, and I think that's a very dangerous direction.
So the script is the same. It's not even the vibe. It's the script is the same. So if we don't acknowledge history, we're doomed to repeat it. Are we in that cycle right now, Whatanui? And is it just that, like, there's another quote. Oh, I'll find it in my notes here. Dun, 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 dun. This was a quote, and I think it was translated on the screen, so I don't know who said it. But talking about all New Zealanders being treated the same, I think it might have been the voiceover says, it saddens me how easily we opt for politics at the expense of Māori. And it's like, how true is that today from what it was 20 years ago, and I guess from what it was in the 1950s? It's like we're in this spin cycle of repetition. How do we break it? How do we get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I on a personal note, when I was going through that speech, man, like, you know, I just don't think people realize how hurtful those words are to someone who was Māori and someone who does listen to that 20 years later. And just reflecting on what was said there in a speech that was about 25 minutes long, I could have taken any 30 seconds of that speech and it would have made just as much of an impact. And I had to sit through the whole interview just to understand how hurtful it was. And I was there in the edit suite again with my editor, bawling my eyes out because it was that hurtful, and it was 20 years later, for crying out loud. And a lot of that was probably because it's the same shit that we're hearing today. It's the same rhetoric that we're hearing today. And for people who, I suppose, see it being said about us and wonder why Māori are so angry, it's because it's absolutely just hurtful. It's hurtful because there's no consideration for everything that Māori have been through. So I just wanted to say that on a completely personal level, on an emotional level, it just breaks me hearing that sort of kōrero again. And I think we see that. We see the same. The reason why we made it so important, because we could have left Brash out of the conversation. He plays a massive part in it, though, because ultimately it was the uprising of Brash and the National Party which led Helen to make these really drastic calls about Foreshore and Seabed, because she was wanting to win an election. And so when you think about that, as simple, when it all boils down, it comes down to a hunger for power. And the power was to stay in government for another year or for another term, because they didn't want to see this rise in the National Party and Don Brash. Because the reality is, the poll after that Orewa speech, national support went up, and they were actually, for the first time in a long time, above Labour. And so Labour had to do something. They had to stand for something. And what is that something? They had to stand for something drastic, and that was not give Māori what they were asking for, to not give Māori the rights to their Foreshore and Seabed. And so I think ultimately that's what it boils down to. When we come to the same thing now, when we come after leading up to the last election, National Act, they all had to stand for something. And what is that something? It's the exact same thing that happened 20 years ago. It's picking on Māori. There's this word from the right saying Māori are getting too much. Māori names on government institutions, all the putia, the money that is given to Māori. The rhetoric was that Māori was getting too much, so we're getting too much, so we needed to do something about it. And so what is that? It's the message is we need to cut some of that stuff, or we're going to crack down harder on those things. So that's the thing that hurts. How do we change that? I mean, if I had the answer, we'd be doing it. I don't think anyone. It has to come down to us as a nation really seriously looking at where we're at, our relationship with each other, both Māori, Pākehā, and everyone else. But ultimately between the Crown and Māori, and figure out a way forward. I don't know that the system has continually been designed to oppress us, so I don't see there being an easy way out of it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, that just hearing you say, hey, look, it's the same message as it was 20 years ago. It was probably the same message 20 years before that and 20 years before that. Māori are getting all of these things. Why are they getting all of these things? And it's not understanding, as you said, the oppression, the amount of wealth that has been extracted from this country, from the land confiscations, from everything that's been taken advantage of in this country at the expense of Māori. And then it gets to this point where people are saying, well, maybe that's not right. Maybe we could even the scales a little bit. People get real bent out of shape about it. I remember hearing the greedy bloody Maori thing, in my early teens. It's ridiculous. And on one hand, I think there has been so much progress and so much more understanding, especially in the last 20 years. It's enormously frustrating when you look back and you do boil it down to it being that simple a message. Māori are getting special treatment. Māori are getting too much. Enough is enough. And people are still scoring political points out of it. It's enormously frustrating.
Yeah, I think the way that it was explained to me by some of the people who I've spoken to over time is that it's just a continuum, and that each time the idea would be that Māori are learning and growing from each time it happens to us. It sucks that something has to happen for us to learn. Something has to happen to us in order for us to learn something from it. But ultimately, you land yourself in my generation, a generation who have reaped the rewards of those who have fought for Māori language education and all that, all of those sorts of things, and get us to now where starting to hit our prime, hit our peak, we have more lawyers, Māori lawyers, than we ever had. We've got more Māori doctors and academics than we've ever had before. So, love to be optimistic about the situation. The sad thing is we just got to ask ourselves how many more, what will be the cost of us finally getting to a point where we can start to work together.
Hey, I've got a question about the march. And it's interesting you're talking about you're making this for your generation, because there seems to be 75 Land March, and then 04 Foreshore and Seabed. And I'm not saying it's the same, it's not my place to say that, but you hear about referendum on the treaty or the principles of the treaty and stuff. Who knows? That might be the next iteration. My question is this, right? In 2004, this image of Dame Whenekupa was carried as the march actually went on. Dame Whenekupa seemed to be, if I have seen further, it's that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Dame Whenekupa seems to have been the giant, the focal point for the giant that in 04 they were standing on. I'm wondering for your generation, looking back to 04, who are the people from the 04 march that are kind of your generation's Dame Whenekupa? Not to put her to the side, but there are a couple of people in there, and you can see it in your documentary, and I'm just giving you a chance to speak to it as well. Whose image will they be carrying through on the next nationwide hikoi, whether it's this year or next year or in 10 years from now? Who are the ones that have come out of that march and that cause?
Well, the beautiful thing is that with the 75 march, there was just Whenekupa, and she led a new generation of activists and leaders. The beautiful thing about the 2004 Hikoi was that there was a generation of leaders who took it to the next level. So it's not like it's just the one person. I mean, Hone Harawira led the Hikoi. He was the national coordinator of the Hikoi. Him and his wife Hilda were instrumental in making sure that they started at the top of the North Island and made their way down to Wellington. They planned it. Yeah, Annette Sykes, Moana Jackson, who were both instrumental in raising the flag, because it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Moana Jackson, Annette Sykes, and other academics and lawyers who were able to see the injustices that happened down in its inception down with Ngāti Apa, which is what this whole debacle is about. They raised the flag. And then you had movers and shakers down the duration of, every part of the country who were activating their pockets of people. But, if you were to put it down to a couple, I'd say Hone, Hilda, and Annette. Well, Hone, Hilda, Annette, and Moana Jackson.
Where would Tariana sit in that one? Because actually, again, watching the doco and seeing that she quit Labour in the middle of this.
Oh, obviously, Tariana is massive. Her crossing the floor. If we're talking about that period and the Foreshore and Seabed issue, definitely Tariana is the matriarch of that whole issue. Crossing the floor was the motivation that our people needed to make sure that they got to Parliament on that day to support her, because they knew that she was going to vote against that bill. So when you look at her and what she did, especially if you take into consideration the political climate at that time, Māori had all 7 Māori seats at that time,
you mean Labour had all 7 Māori seats?
Sorry.
Do you mean Labour? You said Māori had all 7 Māori seats.
Sorry. Labour had the 7 Māori seats in Parliament, and for Tariana to be able to have the courage to stand against what all her mates, all her fellow politicians were in agreement with, because she went back to her people and actually listened to her people, is courageous. And I know that she copped a lot of, and when it's in the documentary, she copped a lot of stuff for around that time. I mean, there's so much that we weren't able to put into the documentary, like being told to bend over in your ministerial car so that you're not seen, and there's talks about her being framed. There was people threatening her, some serious stuff on her and her whānau.
From
her
where?
Kids being...
Can you explain to us where that came from? Is that externally, or is that pressure from within sort of the political sphere? Where were those threats coming from?
I don't know. Not so the threats were from the public, but definitely the pressure that was coming from the Labour from the caucus was massive because she was a minister. They were really putting a lot of pressure on her to hold her position and not rebel against. Because if you stack her and Nanaya up, so Nanaya was an MP at that time. She wasn't a minister, so she was afforded the right to vote against the bill. But for Tariana, because she was a minister, she would lose all her ministerial roles. And they saw that as being a bit of a rebel, and so they wanted to stop her from doing that as much as they could. And so, for a camera to be outside to watch Tariana drive away in her ministerial car, she knew that cameras were going to be there. She was told, bend over, cover yourself up, and let the car drive past. You know, how sick is that to come from your own caucus and see that on the news later that evening? I think it was 2 days later she resigned from the party because of how that made her feel, because of word from her people. All of those things amounted to her finally making the decision to cross the floor.
There's a beautiful moment in the doco, and I'm assuming it's on the day of the vote when she said, you know, to vote against, where she walks down the steps to the protesters. And when she walks down, it's almost like you can see her go, and it almost looks like this moment where she's like, I'm not quite saying the weight was lifted off, but it's like, yeah, that's right, I did it for this sort of thing. It kind of comes across like that. It's a really beautiful moment.
Oh, she was a hero. She was an icon at that time, amongst Māoridom, certainly, because she was able to stand up to what was normal at that time. She was able to stand up stand with her people, her constituents, who said, we do not support this. We do not support this bill.
It also raises the question, and I know it addresses it a little bit in there, but like the John Tamaheres of the world, not to beat him up now, but it never really showed, maybe you do or don't know, you can let us know, why was there the choice for a bunch of others to stay and not follow her? Because that's even more brave, to be the one to go. Did those guys have regret today? Do you know what I mean, look, I'm not trying to beat them up, but there seems to be a little bit of a, you know, we'd rather be on the inside looking out than the outside looking in, which seems a bit feeble to me, to be really honest with you, especially when you look back and you see who was on the right side of history and who was on the wrong side of history. How does the Māori caucus feel about that today, the ones that you spoke to and interviewed, about not leaving?
Yeah, I mean, there's a line from JT who said it was easier to leave than it was to stay.
Right.
Because if you left, you were with your however many thousands of people out in the forecourt of Parliament, but staying on the other side meant that you were hated by your own people for so long. But I think that to summarize their answers, I think that if they had another go at it, I think the results, the how they would have voted would have been different. But
right.
I think what became really clear in the way that when we interviewed them was that whether they crossed the floor or not, the bill was going to go ahead. So because they had the votes of Winston, and Winston had 13 votes, so that it sort of made the Māori MPs redundant. And so they felt that it was pointless crossing the floor. It would be better if they stayed inside and tried to make the best moves for the bill in order to get the best outcome for people. So, some would say that that's a cop-out. My dad being a member of Parliament for years, I understand the politics of it. I still think that it was a little bit of a cop-out. And you could definitely see, JT's the sort of person that will never probably admit to being regretful of that situation, but I could certainly see it in his eyes. And then you got Nanaya. Nanaya was, when we spoke to her, it was 2 weeks after the election.
So she was
still hurt.
Wow.
And what I admired about her was her ability to reflect on a pretty tough part of her campaign as a member of Parliament, and speak so openly about her thoughts on that situation. I've never understood why she stayed with the Labour Party and why she ultimately, in the third reading of the bill, supported it. But her stance, as she says in the documentary, was that she felt that that creating a new political party would not change the bill as it was presented to the Parliament at that particular time. It would take a few years before the impacts of the Māori Party could ever do anything about a bill like that. And so she decided to stay the course, stay with her party, and actually get into a position where she could negotiate some things, change some things in that bill, which I suppose she ultimately got to because on the third reading she voted for it.
Chewy, got anything for us, mate?
Oh, so much, and I haven't even watched it yet. Look, I think this is really important, and I think I take your point that it's for the generation that protested and the generations that are going to protest in the future. I think it's really important for people like me, people who have been maybe a little bit sheltered to the struggle that is going on and being exposed to the more prevalent views of the time growing up. Maybe we're a little bit sheltered here in the South Island. But I tell you what, over the past 10 years, I've done a lot of learning, and it's stuff like this that is incredibly important to take in their other point of view, to look at the framing of how things from the past are driving things today. And it's really important in those face-to-face conversations that you have with people to know what it is, know what the hurt is, know what the angles that people are playing, and know what we're driving towards. And I don't think that more recognition for Māori or more redress for Māori or more, it even comes down to the language, more Māori language in use. The names on government buildings being Māori. It takes nothing away from me. But it means the world to people that have had it already taken away from them. And these guys are quite happy to talk about division. We all need to be the same, all of that sort of stuff. We don't need to be the same. We need to recognize each other's differences and celebrate them as well. It's pieces like the work that you've done here that's important to that, and my hat's off to you. So I'm glad you don't, and it's on the docket for me to watch tomorrow.
The other thing, Chewy, about when people say we all need to be the same, what they're actually saying is you need to be like me. You never hear people saying let's all be the same and they be like the migrant or they be like the other people. What they're saying is you need to be like me. People don't want to be the same. They want people to be like them. This was an eternal conversation on Talkback when I used to do it. People would talk about the migrants coming to the country and not becoming a part of the community and having their own enclaves. And I'm like, dude, when you go visiting someone's house, they have to open the door for you. Your new Indian neighbors, have you asked them over for dinner yet? Have you asked them to, have you welcomed them into the community? And it's always no. So that's what they're saying. They're saying you should be like me. That's what I've experienced, at least, Whatanui.
I mean, yeah, you just listened to Seymour when he was up at Waitangi this year, and says that people who get off at the Auckland airport today should have the same rights as everyone else in this country. I just, how again, how can you be seriously clear about that message and not take into consideration the past and all the trauma and all the things that Māori have faced over the last 184 years or however long since the signing of the treaty? It hurts, and it's the hope is, I'm real optimistic about the next generation and how we're working together with young Pākehā who are in the same generation as me, because I genuinely feel that there's a shift happening, and we are working together. And maybe that's because there's more Māori kids being born around the country. I'm real optimistic about where we're heading, and I don't know if it's still going to be down the same structure, because the fear is right that it's just going to happen 20 years later. Because ultimately, the people who still hold the power are the people who aren't going to pay attention to this document, who aren't going to pay attention to anything that Māori are doing at the full court of Parliament, because that's not the priority.
I feel like there is a cohort of really strong, politically switched on young Māori leaders in their early 20s that are just growing, and they are taking all of this in, and they are taking on the lessons from people that have gone before them, and they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I hope that we all don't leave them hung out to dry, walking that line all by themselves. I don't think that'll happen. Doesn't feel like that's the vibe at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that one of the parts of our culture that's massive is that the respect for the generation that's before us. So one of the big things when you go onto a marae is that you're not allowed to speak until your father's either passed on or handed the mantle on to you to get up and speak. And so that's why in Te Ao Māori, you often see a generation below who may be really strong and really ready to go. They won't take that loudest voice. Then they won't lead the team because their father or their parents are still alive. It's certainly the position that I'm in, and I've been in for a long time. Probably up until I started telling this documentary about 8 months ago, and I saw the rise of the energy towards the government. We're starting to break that trend politically, and it's absolutely necessary because we've got tools that they never had back then. We've got tools like social media that's seeing this massive uprising of my generation, informing, educating, but also empowering ourselves to say, actually, you deserve this. This is what our parents and all those protest movements that have happened before, they all fought for this very moment for us to be the way that we are. And we should actually just celebrate the fact that we're still here, because there's been a system that's designed to try and eradicate us.
I think the other thing, we're talking about the next generation, I think there's just a shift in society. And without trying to be a smart ass and segueing, there's a story out today. Chewy, you brought up the thing about Māori names on government departments. There's a story coming out today about the new Disability Minister, Louise Upston, insisting on Whaikaha rebranding and wanting to call it the disability, whatever the other name is. I don't even know. But what they're finding is that those that work within Whaikaha are like, we're not changing it. So it doesn't just necessarily feel like the youngins either. It feels like that this is on some level a societal change. And of course, this government said for a long time, we're going to leave it up to chief executives how they implement it. Until a chief executive implements something they don't want, then they start throwing their weight around. And I've highlighted just a part here that says here, by telling staff to continue using the name Whaikaha, Ministry of Disabled People ACT Party, Public Service spokesperson Todd Stevenson said, that's the surname of the CE, was undermining the coalition government. The chief executive's instruction actively contradicts the government's policy for public agencies to transition English primary names, he said. So I'm seeing pushback. It was like, this is a clip. Actually, I'll play it. I'll play the clip. I wonder how much of it's bluster and bullshit and how much of it's real. This is a clip where, this is not about this story, but where the Bish got called out on using the Māori name for a public service. So how much of this is posturing and how much of this is real?
That's why are you using the Te Reo name for that entity rather than the English name?
That's a good question. You guys have got in your coalition agreement that you're reverting the names back to English.
Yeah.
Why are you using Kāinga Ora?
Because that's how it's known. That's its name.
What's that? Change.
Well, all I'm saying to you is we wanted to make sure when we've had a public service that is chronically underdelivered for New Zealand.
Yeah, then he just goes back to his talking points about money and labour bad and stuff. So it feels like that there is a push from like within society as well, not necessarily Māori. I imagine everyone that works for the disability sector is not Māori, but there's a groundswell coming. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's the thing that I do like about that story is that there are people out there who are wanting to fight to keep the name a Māori name. I mean, I'm really sort of in two minds about whether I think that those government agencies should have Māori names anyway, because I think that, the way that I see my language anyway is that each word has a spiritual power. And unless that word is being upheld to its mana or to the meaning of its word, then it should never be placed on a on a department or on a system. And I don't think that any of those systems currently are reflective of the beautiful names that have been put on them. And so, you know, you sort of, it sort of battles me, the idea that these names, but I will say that I absolutely love that people are standing up and really wanting to fight for those names to remain.
Yeah. I was going to say one other thing about the doco in particular. A man who I've admired from afar for a long time, one of my bucket list things is to own some of his art one day. Sure, you'll love this, being a protester at your heart. Old Tama Iti, he speaks in the documentary about protest, and this is what he says. It's about igniting something within us, yet always prioritizing peace. We mustn't succumb to chaos. That path leads to darkness. Awesome. And I also love the parts in the doco where he giggles and he talks about how he's good at shit stirring. I'm pretty good at that. But that thing about, you know, to succumb to that leads to darkness, I'm just like, you know, just amazing message to come out about protest and about, you know, even if it's inconvenient for some people, to make sure what you're protesting about and how you're protesting doesn't lead to darkness. It's beautiful.
You could slot that into a Star Wars movie pretty easily. That's some Jedi shit right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's because what led to that question was, were you spitting at JT on the forecourt of Parliament, or were you spitting at or what were you spitting at the person, or were you spitting at what he was standing for, what he stood for, what he represented? And then that led on to that that answer. And we've also seen it go wrong so many times. We've seen protests go wrong and turn to violence and all that sort of thing. The thing was that they mobilized, 50,000, well, Hone and them say that was 50,000 people, not one arrest. When I asked Hone about whether anyone got arrested, he reckons, no, there was one clown who tried to climb the harbour bridge, and he got pulled down by some of the brothers and got given a bit of a hiding, and then he continued on the Hikoi, but not one arrest. And also the Hikoi was a big part of the rise of Māori liaison officers within the police, which was cool.
Yeah. We saw it again a little bit this year, when the Te Pāti Māori put together that march in like 48 hours. And I don't know if the government kind of was too worried about it, maybe not quite the same vibe as Helen Clark back in the day, but all of a sudden it was just like whoosh. And I guess one of the things about protest, that if you can demonstrate strength in numbers, then your message has to be listened to, if not by the right people, by society, you know, by the media, getting your message out there. And so that's still there, isn't it? It's still there with Māori coming together. And I think, again, in your documentary, the idea of like Māori from all over the country coming together on one message, and that seems to be a cultural identity that Māori have when it comes to these important things to speak about.
Yeah, well, it's just the willingness to, it's that that fire that burns within when you know something's wrong, and that desire to stand up and make it known. I think it's something that lives in every Indigenous person in the world, when they know that something's been taken away from them. The sad thing is that more often than not, it's at the cost of something, and I think that's what we got to be mindful of, is what we need to really sort of think about is how to mobilize when something's not been taken away from us, but mobilizing for the fact that we need to continue to hold people accountable, as opposed to just waiting for something to be a bill in order to mobilize.
Anything else you got, Chewy, or is it probably time for us to let Whatanui go for the night? I just had a look. There's a bunch of super chats here, but the super chats are all comments. They're not questions, so we can get to them at the end. It's fine.
Yeah, no, once again, mate, just thanks for coming on the show. These discussions, I think, are incredibly important, and I know that the listeners and the watchers have really appreciated it, as judging by the chat that has been flying past my eyeballs as we discuss it.
Yeah, cool. Oh, thank you for the opportunity to come on, and yeah, I mean, if we can encourage as many of our people as many people as possible to share the link around to their people, so that we can get as many eyeballs on it as possible. And that's not from a views perspective or a numbers or contract perspective. That's more just because it's a story that people need to hear, and it's an incredibly important part of our history, and we need to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
So is this the
100%.
only TVNZ Plus, the only place you can see it right now?
So in 30 days, well, in how many days? In about 25 days, RNZ are going to drop it on YouTube, so it will be able to be watched overseas as well, which is cool. And hopefully they will run their own promo campaign and all that sort of stuff to get it out there.
A bit of a big question. Well, not big question at all, really. Pointless question, but with a big answer. Just thinking about the latest Julian Dennison movie about the 1981 Springbok tour. Have you ever come across people thinking about turning this story into a movie, having a dramatization of it and telling the story that way as well?
I've been thinking about that. Yeah, it might be a little while, or maybe 50 years. No, we don't want to wait that long. Hold on, maybe 30 years. Yeah. There's definitely those conversations. I think one thing that has come from it is that there are a lot of people who are wanting these types of stories on more of the big protest movements that have happened over the years. I think that a documentary story similar to this simply about colonization here in Aotearoa is really important, and so that we can share it around, so that it's understandable for so many people. Because I think that Māori have done a lot of decolonization work over the last 30, 40 years. And in order to decolonize your mind, you need to understand colonization so that you can start to make critical decisions about whatever situation, or you start to understand why you are the way that you are. And so I think that by looking at colonization as a focal point, hopefully we can start to understand why more Māori than any other are in prisons, why Māori are at the bottom of at the top of every horrible statistic and all that sort of stuff. So I think that would probably be my particular genre, and because I'm more into factual documentary telling as opposed to drama.
Very cool. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. And everyone can, as I'll put it up there again so people can see, head to TVNZ Plus, Hikoi Speaking Our Truth. It's an hour. It's an easy watch for time. It's a hard watch. Sometimes the subject matter is a hard, not bad, but hard to watch. But it's an easy watch. It's an hour, and you can check it out. As I said, everyone has to watch it before the end of the weekend, or don't come back and see us on Monday night. I think that's fair, Chewy, isn't it? Have to.
Yes.
And if you watch it before Monday, you can come twice on Monday. So we'll give you a reward for watching it. Hey, Whatanui, thanks so much. And make sure you drop me a text when it's about to go up on YouTube, and we'll point people to it again.
Awesome, bro. Thank you,
All
boys.
Right. And hey to your dad, all the best. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.
Director of Hikoi, Speaker of Truth. That is Whatanui Flavell. There you go. Chewy, should we get some of those super chats and stuff? Now, I know people have put super chats in there, but they weren't questions, and we said to Whatanui we'd be sort of 40 minutes, and it's been an hour, so good to go.
we weren't sticking to that time. I could tell just as soon as
he must have, he said he watches some of our stuff. He probably understands what a BHN 40 minutes in. If a BHN hour goes for 90, then a BHN 40 goes for 60. That makes sense.
It's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite comment of the night. I'll just notice the timestamp. Timestamp's not on it. Two minutes before we go to air, my fan club arrives. Thank you very much. Also worthy of note, Cooking Nick was on time.
Oh, good. Do you know what I thought?
Just remarkable.
Do you know what I'm proudest of tonight? I'm proudest of at no point when we're talking about the documentary and the people in it did I do this. That's what I'm proudest of. That at no point did I go.
We're going to rename it the Helen Clark Memorial Trumpet.
Fucking hell, bro. Like, honestly, I mean, I was an adult. I'm not trying to plead ignorance as a child or anything, but I wasn't as politically active in the time. You watch that documentary, honestly, you watch that documentary and you will question how Māori could ever vote for Labour again. Like what she said and what she did. As I said, cut her words out, put them in print, hand them to David Seymour, hand them to Don Brash. That's what it sounds like. Honestly, how the hell Māori ever voted for Labour again? Like ever again. It's just no idea.
Yeah. We had people in the chat that were on that Hikoi. Wow. I was one of those thousands, and my son was a little bit older than Tamati Marching 2. It was a moment that I've never feel like I need to explain myself about. Yeah, 100%. I can only imagine what it's like standing in a movement that numerous, you know. So yeah, awesome stuff. Super chat time. History shows that so-called haters and wreckers were on the right side of history, while Auntie Helen is on the wrong side. Correct.
I wonder why she won't talk about it. Because it seems like what Whatanui was saying was, you know, JT, John Tamahiri and those guys are a bit like, oh, yeah, we might have got it wrong then. I wonder why. I wonder why. Because, you know, to mea culpa is actually a really powerful thing. To go, you know what, we were wrong. It's a really powerful and a really healing thing. And in fact, now that I'm thinking as I talk, you know, how I operate, her maybe being honest about it, figuring out and apologizing about it might be a way to actually show Māori we dropped the ball on that issue. I mean, it's a bit like when Roger Douglas was in Labor and they sold all the assets. It's like he had a different agenda. You know, Labor had to move away from that and kind of, you know, they had to mea culpa to get people's trust back again. And I wonder if it's a bit the same. It's probably quite powerful for Helen Clark to come out and unless, of course, she's not sorry. Unless she didn't think she did the wrong
that's
thing.
kind of what it like. I think if you were able to sit back and reflect on what you had a problem coming forward and saying, yeah, I got that one wrong. Heaps of people do it. The fact that she doesn't, that kind of says all it needs to say to me. You know, could be wrong. She could always come on the show and correct us.
I've contacted her.
But as it stands at the moment, Brash and Helen joining Seymour in the Shit Human Being Club.
It's an interesting thing to think about politics. Like the bad versus the good. Like, is there a bad that you can do that outweighs all the good you have done? I mean, we often talk about those things that the country holds on to, and we point to things like working for families and interest-free student loans, both things introduced under Helen Clark's government. Where does that you know what I mean? It's like, how will she be remembered in history as someone who brought some of these legislations to the country that we all hold on to and want to keep, or the person that was a far right leader smashing the Indigenous people in 2004?
So this is my thing with Helen, is I think she was an authoritarian. You know, she was like being a strong leader sometimes cuts too far, right? And I think we saw that when she lost, is that there was nobody in the front bench of Labor that was ready to pick up the torch at that stage, and that's because of how Helen ran Labor. She was a very hard lady, and you know, that's the thing. You hear the Seabed and Foreshore also illustrating that same point. You saw that she basically put the Labour Party on the back foot for years after she left. And that's all just part of it.
Yeah.
Any
Anything
more
else in
comment
the chat there?
you want to hit? There's so many, but I've done a whole bunch.
I'm looking at the super chats and stuff as well, just to make sure we get people through.
Okay. David Seymour. I heard he's the worst example of humanity, even with these historical challenges.
At least you're consistent, people. That's good.
Strong argument there. Peter with an excellent comment. Any New Zealander who wants to live in a just and fair society should just confront and understand our history. There really is nothing to fear in doing so. I am a strong believer in that. Your history guides your future. And I think there's too many people that don't have a good grip on history, either on a world stage or on a New Zealand stage and that sort of thing. And it leaves you ignorant if you're not aware of it. And it also, history isn't, as much as it's easy to go, history isn't set in stone. You can have a point of view that you looked at something, you can come back to it later and review it.
Yeah, your history.
You don't have to die on a particular hill. What else have we got? Oppression of Māori stopped New Zealand from becoming a bigger factor in global economy because we were big in Australia in the Pacific trade, and it was costly to suppress us. Yep, I love that story of the British colonies in Australia essentially reliant on food shipments from New Zealand, from Māori, flying under a Māori flag, delivering kumara and other food to New South Wales, I think it was. Yeah, absolutely true. And what, there was another one. Yeah, this one. Lutrify says, I maintain that within my life, there are strong reasons to be hopeful. In schools, in our young, in the media, Aotearoa is waking up to itself over how vital Māori are to our national identity.
Hmm.
Yeah, 100%. One of the, just anecdotally, one of the things that really sort of rocked me a couple of years ago is that there was a kapa haka performance in the mall down here in Dunedin from one of the local primary schools. And I looked at the kids doing it, and it was Māori kids, Pākehā kids, Indian kids, some of the Syrian refugees were there. Like, that was the thing. It didn't matter where they were coming from. They're all in the kapa haka group, and they're all singing in Māori. It was awesome. It was a moment. And for some people, that idea of New Zealand is scary and challenging, and it shouldn't be. That's the future.
Just to wrap up the news items of the day, because we do 3 news items a day, purely by chance, Hikoi was at Parliament today. Hundreds marched to oppose the fast track bill. Marchers gathered at Wellington Railway Station for the Hikoi, making their way to the Beehive at about 1 p.m. earlier this afternoon. At Parliament grounds, the Hikoi was greeted by Māori Development Minister Tama Potaka and RMA Minister Chris Bishop, who is in charge of the fast-track legislation. Iwi members presented trees and a petition that outlined their concerns. Ngāti Toa Chief Executive Helmut Modick said the proposed bill increases the likelihood of irreversible harm to our taao, ecosystem and biodiversity. Just because we advertised we were going to talk about that kind of wraps up the Hikoi. I do wonder what's going to happen with the, the principles of the treaty bill. And if you watch the doco, you get reminded of what was said at Waitangi this year. That's how the doco finishes. And Seymour is a twat, and Winston Peters is worse. Same, much worse. I don't know. Terrible as well, screaming at people, did we ever say we were getting rid of the treaty? No. But if you change how we use the treaty, then you can null and void it. It's the same thing.
They want to catch you in that trap. Yeah. Don't let them catch you in that trap. Just be very clear about that. We know what they're doing.
We could talk about woke school lunches today, but I think we'll just leave that till tomorrow. Because we can, because it feels like this is a nice place to wrap up. Anything else you want to say or add to it before we
I am going to I think I want to finish off with one comment. When we were talking about how words hurt and words can stay with you long after a physical injury is gone. Yeah. This cracking comment came up in the chat from Ruru. There's a Māori saying that the spear may fly and miss its mark, but the spoken word hits home every time.
Yep. Don't teach your kids that sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You don't typically sit with a counsellor 30 years later talking about how you broke your arm on the trampoline. You do about the parent or teacher or whatever that called you dumb for 10 years. Words can be far, far, far more harmful than sticks and stones. And on that note, I feel like we should finish with some kind of positive affirmation, Chewy. That would be do you do that during the day?
No, I go out the back to my crying cupboard, get it out, and then go back on the floor.
All right, team. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just huge thanks to Whatanui to come on and have a chat with us. I always love it. It might sound a little bit wanky, but when people trust us with their stories, trust us to come and talk about what they do and what they're about, and they're the experts in the room, because we're just a couple of buffheads from Dunedin, So huge thanks to him. And if you, I know I've said it 10 times tonight, if you haven't seen the doco yet, you should go watch it. It's a really, really good documentary. Blew me away, some of the stuff in there. And if you're a bit like me and you're of the age that was kind of around you, you're in society as an adult, but you weren't too invested in it. It's a eye opener. Like, honestly, I have a different opinion of the 2000s Labour Party and of Helen Clark after seeing it. And it's another reason I wonder if she had the mana, for want of a better word, to stand up and actually speak to it. That would actually speak to if I was right or wrong about her in that decade. Like if she talked about it today, that would be that. So if she doesn't talk about it, I've sort of changed my mind a little bit, not all the way. There's good stuff as well, but a little bit. And yeah, I think it would be powerful for her to speak to this. Hopefully she will one day. Too Maggie bullfeds. All right. That's us. We're done. Kia ora. Thank you for being with us tonight. We appreciate you all. We'll be back tomorrow night for another edition of Big Hairy News. Now, we might even try the Discord tomorrow night. We set up the desk with Discord, Chewy, so I think it might work. So maybe tomorrow night we'll have to give it a test.
And see if we
There you go.
can get to a few people.
There you go, folks. You got a little less than 24 hours to get your thoughts together.
Yeah, and also actually, if you've watched the doco, maybe we could do that as well. We could throw open the Discord. What I'm saying is we'll open the Discord, and if it works, maybe we could have a chat. If some of you have seen it, you can tell us your thoughts as well. All right, team. Love you to bits. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.